Welcome to Arise and Shine podcast. My name is Sharri, and today's episode, we're going to be talking about trust. I have the honor to have my dear friend, Stephanie, with us today. She's a survivor with many years of recovery. She's a very talented writer and artist, and I really love the topic that she's going to share today. But before we get into any of that, welcome, Stephanie. It's good having you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sherry, for this opportunity. It's really nice of you to invite me and to give me this chance to talk, share my story a little.
Yeah, well, so that people can get to know you a better before we get into the topic of trust. What are some things about you present day that you would like to share? Thinking of like if you look back and think of where you came from and all the years of recovery and where you're at now, just kind of present day.
Well, I could share what happened in the very, very present day. What happened
Sure.
today. I normally do a kind of therapy called transformational prayer ministry. And what that therapy consists of is that I have a mentor and we meet together and he helps me to be able to get in touch with God, who really acts as the therapist. My mentor is just more helping me go through the process of using the prayer as a way to gain healing. And so this last week, I prayed for some additional healing and I got back some difficult things from the past, some memories, and have had a challenging week. But normally, when a therapist is able to be there for a mentor, it it gives you a feeling of support and relationship and helps you face the things from the past.
Right.
But one of the things that I really love about the kind of therapy that I'm doing now with the transformational prayer ministry is that I can do that with or without a mentor or a therapist. And so today, my mentor was with family and asked if we could reschedule our appointment till tomorrow. And in the past, that would have been something that really would have been a struggle for me. I would have
Mhm.
dealt with feelings of, oh, okay, so I've asked for this healing and I'm working through it and it's really hard and I was looking forward to someone helping me with it, but now they're not here and I probably would have felt abandoned and maybe just given up and not uh, taken the steps that I needed to gain greater peace by taking things directly to the Lord myself. And because of the mentoring and the helping me through this, I think I'm finally to a place where I can use this practice on a more regular basis and really turn to God to to get the answers that I need and to get the peace that I need and the healing.
Yes, I think that's something you and I have in common where we had years of traditional therapy and uh, I've had some prayer ministry sessions now since last September, and it's different than traditional therapy, that's for sure, because she'll pray um, even before we get on the Zoom together, and then basically it's sort of like therapy where the Holy Spirit helps me to know what to work on, but then the Holy Spirit is definitely guiding the whole process, and Jesus can do the healing, and it's so has been transformational. I know why that I can see why they call it transformational prayer ministry. Uh, would you want to share more about what specifically, like whether it's in a session with your prayer minister that's doing the transformational prayer or by yourself, like what you did? Would you want to share that process? Like what happens with people who don't maybe know what that's like?
Yeah, that would be great. So, like you said, we both come to the session having prayed. And there are days and times when I'm dealing with parts of myself that have become more estranged to God or have some anger or have some trepidation about all of that. But that's the beauty of this is it doesn't require you to have a perfect relationship with God. You can be wherever you're at. Um, a, a prerequisite would be a belief in God. But it's interesting to me because I feel like most survivors have a belief in God. There are very few that just don't believe. A lot of them might not understand, and I could say that I'm in that camp too. You know, there's no way to understand everything that we go through in this life and why God allows that to happen or why if God can intervene sometimes he doesn't intervene all the time. And so you basically have to have a belief in God, but you can work with that belief wherever you're at emotionally.
Mhm.
One of the things that I love about it is that with traditional talk therapy, oftentimes I would get into something over my head because I didn't have a sense of how much was too much or how much was not enough. So a lot of times I would spend time talking about fluffy things or things that I didn't really need to talk about in therapy because I didn't want to get to the hard stuff because it was just too painful. And then there were other times when I would end up reliving something and too much would come back all at once. And then the session would be over and the therapist would be ready to uh, send me home. And I would be in a bad state of mind and be very disassociated and very upset and really need another 3 or 4 hours of therapy to get myself back into a good place. But depending on the therapist and not being able to just depend on God was a handicap. And so this way we pray and ask that just enough will come back and not too much and not too little. And God has a way of doing that so that it's smooth. And I used to kind of dread therapy, dread working on healing because I just never knew what it was going to be like. But after doing this for a while, I go away from a session feeling better than I did before I went into a session. And that makes a huge difference because then I can look forward to having the session instead of getting a migraine or throwing up or doing whatever I used to do. I used to get myself really worked up emotionally before I had to go to therapy because I didn't want to know about my past and I didn't want to face the difficult things that I had to face. And now when I'm facing it, I know that God is there and I know that He's going to help me work out whatever problems there are and He's going to see me through the next week. And I don't have to do this on my own. And it's taken me a long, long, long time to get to where I know I'm not alone and know that he's with me.
Yeah. I think of there's nothing wrong with traditional therapy. it helped me for years, as I know it has for you, to be able to talk and connect with parts. But there's something about the difference, and I wish I had known about it sooner, but I didn't trust God enough to go there. It was like, no, 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 we're not doing any spiritual stuff. Like that's not going to be a part of my therapy, because he was too scary. But anyway, like some of the times, just like what you said, is like I felt like I was having surgery in my therapy and things were open, cut open, and then there's no sutures. There's no, what do you do with this now? And a lot of times there was flooding because of programming or just because it brought up too much. And so I love how you talked about, with the transformational prayer that you've done now, that wherever your parts are at that time, even if one of you believes in God and has some trust for him, all of you is going to benefit. And it is different. It's like you pray, and the prayer minister prays ahead of time. And then if things are going to be opened up, it's more like spiritual surgery where, then the Lord is, like doing the tending to our heart and emotions and our soul. And there was one day in my prayer ministry session where Jesus was literally, and I saw this like not a vision, but like in my mind's eye, like where he was taking a piece of gold, some kind of mesh or material, just like a physician would do in surgery, and was putting it over my heart that just felt so broken. And he was literally sewing the pieces of that particular wound in my heart back together. And I felt his peace. I felt relief. It was like that pain and anguish was no longer there. And I just think it's a beautiful thing, Stephanie, that you have found that and I have. And not to dismiss therapy and counselors and all of that at all, but that when we're ready, and I think that's the biggest thing, when we have parts that have learned to trust ourselves, learn to trust God at all, and we find out He's not the evil monster that our abusers made him out to be. Um, it's like, oh, yeah, we can start trusting Him. And so when you did this on your own, since your prayer minister was not available, um, how did that look for you, like doing it without him? And like you mentioned, like normally if a therapist and wasn't available, then it's like all these abandonment issues and like all of that tends to come up. So how is it different for you now, like doing what you did in a healing session by yourself with the Lord?
Yeah.
But
One of the things that I really enjoyed when I started the prayer ministry was that there's a formal prayer that we do together before each session. And it's a perimeter prayer. And it basically addresses a lot of the concerns that parts of me who were brainwashed or mind controlled have about the possibility of evil being there and watching or listening or knowing that I somehow was doing healing work and coming against that in some way, shape, or form. And so to say those words, that powerful perimeter prayer, uh, really set my mind at ease and helps me get into a more relaxed state to be able to heal. And that's something that I really appreciate and was able to do on my own this morning. So I started with that. And then there was a memory that I was working through that was fairly horrific, and I didn't get back a lot of information about it. This time, when I prayed for additional healing and it started to come back, it was more like just things that came in the night and flashback type of scenarios where I was just getting little bits and pieces. And then when I would try and go back into the memory, it was very difficult because I had a lot of emotions, and the emotions were very intense and painful, and I didn't want to feel them, and I couldn't sort them out. And it felt like it wasn't just a single part of me that experienced the thing that I was remembering. It was more like there were uh, it was confusing. So because of developing the relationship that I have with God, I'm able to ask him questions and ask him to tell me or show me truths about different things. And so through that process, I was able to just ask questions. A lot of things I didn't know, like how old was I? Where did this take place? Things like that,
Mhm.
just in order to give it some kind of context within my mental framework of my life, because it was so fragmented that it just felt like it was out of space and
Mhm.
didn't feel super real. But when I got more details, then I was able to look at it and I was able to ask God, why did this cause me so much pain, and what is my mental pain about? And then I was able to sort through feelings of being concerned that maybe something similar was going to happen to me. So I had fears that were grounded in a child experiencing things, but now as an adult, I can ask God, is this going to happen to me? And I can get a clear answer. No, that's not going to happen to me. And so I'm not going to have to live through something like that again. And I'm also not going to, I had a lot of fears uh, about what was done. It it's just gaining greater perspective, really.
Mhm.
Gaining God's perspective makes a big difference.
Yeah,
And
it does.
you were talking earlier about uh, that maybe part of us uh, has a relationship with God or knows God, and then I feel like for me, there wasn't a time that I can't remember that part of me didn't know God. And that knowing in that one part was able to help me survive.
Yeah,
But a lot of what I did in my mind, uh, I, I guess I could not hold on to what was happening in my life and hold on to that all-knowing faith of God. So the part of me that knew God separated from the rest of me. And it's been a healing process to bring integration to all parts of me so that I'm not divided within myself. And
that's a big problem for survivors. It's like the people that do the programming purposefully engineer walled off parts, and then there's layers and layers of conditioning that each of those parts carry. So even if we have one pretty strong part that knows God or knows the truth about him or Jesus, then it's like that doesn't necessarily like spread out to everyone within. I I love I think you called it a perimeter prayer. Um, there's a prayer that my prayer minister says to lots of times where, especially in our earlier sessions, and now it's just a given, that we just proclaim that this is something that we have in our sessions, but like that there would be no retribution or backlash within the system. And I always felt like I could trust that God was present and that God was protecting me, because there's demonic that attaches to those parts of us. And because the demonic was invited in, not by us, but with the rituals and stuff that were done, it's like they have legal right to harass. And working with those kind of parts, it's like when there's that powerful prayer with the name of Jesus, the parts that fear, because fear is put into us during the conditioning, but I think the demonic likes to fuel that fear within us. And so just with that prayer, I know for me, I've felt God's presence and I've felt his protection, and then he can actually achieve whatever he's wanting to heal. And it just is so much more effective than, like going into therapy and what if, and the therapist asks, well, what do you want to talk about today? And there isn't that component of, well, let's see what God wants to do today. Um, so it's a beautiful thing. And I know my trust in God, the different parts of me has grown in as a direct result of the prayer ministry sessions. How has it been for you? Like, when you think of the part of you that knows God and then the other parts that don't, and they're kind of walled off from each other, has that increased your system, their ability to trust in greater ways? How has that increased your faith? Um, just anything you want to share about the process?
Yeah, one of the things that always uh, that I kind of struggle with when people mention the demonic is that I feel like a lot of times when people are talking in terms of deliverance or um, ways of dealing with the demonic, I've noticed, and I wonder if this is the same for you, Sharri, that when I have a demon, some kind of demonic attachment or some kind of demonic energy or presence or problem, that I can often trace it back to either a lie that I'm still believing or something that I'm doing that's counter what I should be doing. And then once I'm able to correct my thinking or correct my doing, then that demonic spirit no longer has any kind of reason to be there. And there's no negativity or nothing in it for them anymore. And so I feel like true deliverance comes through repentance, more or less. And that it's not about, I get frustrated when people from the outside say, well, I can just deliver you, I'll use my faith in Jesus Christ and I'll just cast all the demons out and then your problems will be, solved like that. And
I'm
then
laughing.
then there's no, nothing else you need to
Yes.
do. And I feel like sometimes people will get temporary relief and they'll really believe that all of that worked. But then because those demons still have strongholds or still have a reason to be there, then it comes back and then the person feels worse and it's almost worse than if they wouldn't have, you know.
Yeah, it's like it stirs things up in the spiritual realm, but it's also like you can't cast out parts, that have any attachments. But I know I was laughing not because it's literally funny, but I was laughing at the attempts that there has been in my life with people, well-meaning people. Well, let's just deliver her from this demonic stuff, as if parts, and I'm just reconnecting with parts and getting lots of healing. And it's not like they might believe they're evil, and they believe that they're bad because they've been told they're demons, or there is that demonic attachment. But it's like it does not work to do all that, like trying to cast out demons. For me, it's more been like when I can connect with a part in my ministry session, and then I'm able to identify what's the lie that was conditioned and suggested when there's terror being done to me as a child, to put that suggestion in there. And it's done like where they repeat stuff over and over so that it reinforces that lie as if that's what the truth is. And when Jesus can help us to know what the lie is, and he can tell us what the truth is, because he is truth, there is no deliverance happening as far as like, oh, this, deliverance session where, yeah, he delivers us, but it's done differently than what some well meaning Christian might think needs to happen. And
Yeah, I
it's,
think sometimes people want they want the benefit without paying the price. Like they don't
yes.
want to come in contact with what it is within them
Hmm.
that is causing the demonic to be there in the first place. They want to avoid any of that and they just want a quick fix, want it
Hmm.
gone. And I feel like God does do miraculous healings from time to time, and there have been things that I consider very miraculous in my life, but a lot of my healing has come because I'm willing to go there.
Yes.
Even when it hurts, I'm willing to.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's something that people need to hear is that, we as humans want a quick fix. We want the pain and anguish and torment that we're in and the conflicts that are set up in our minds to be over because, we usually live years in that pain and anguish, and the parts need rescued from the anguish that they're in. But if we just think and get into that belief that, oh, I just get deliverance, and cast all this out and get rid of all the demonic, the parts in us can be re traumatized. I've had it happen to me where the reason there's quiet in the system then within is because they're re traumatized, not because uh, there was evil cast out or demons cast out. Um, I met a woman just this year that she was doing everything in her own strength and power to avoid connecting to her parts. And she was so believing and putting her trust in other people to cast these demons out and get rid of this attack, even to the point where she's labeling herself as a targeted individual, and that all these perpetrators and everyone else outside of her is doing all this to her. And I simply, the Lord had me ask her a question. I simply said to her, have you tried connecting with the parts of you that are in pain? She wasn't willing to do that. And I don't blame her. Um, the beliefs that are instilled in our minds are that if we connect with any of those parts and any of the trauma, we are either going to have to self harm, that we will go crazy, or that we're just going to die. It's just like a and then there's all the programming, that what's going to happen to other people. And it's a very real uh, danger because there's so much programming that's set up to keep the the perpetrators and the cultic criminal groups from being exposed, but also to make sure of us not talking and breaking through the programming. And it's something that is needed, is to connect with the parts of us because they're children that were wounded and terrified, and the lies that they truly believe because that's all they knew and that's all they were shown. Jesus can give every single part of us hope, even if they believe they're a demon from hell itself. And he can help them to know the truth about themselves, that they were harmed, they were lied to, they were tortured and horribly abused, ritual abuse and mind control and trafficking and just all of the things that in all the years that this goes on. you know I think of trust, which is kind of our theme today, but why would any part of us trust anything or anyone? I mean, seriously, and much less Jesus or God, who has been, these people destroy the concept of a loving God, and they teach us that this is what love is, what they're doing to us. It's all twisted, and I never want to give Satan too much credit, but the enemy does um, have a strategy and a plan for each of us, just like God does. And his is for destroying and stealing and killing, and trying to keep us from having a relationship with God and being able to trust him.
About how our beliefs are formed on our experiences, and what we really
Yes.
believe comes from what we experience. So I
Hmm.
think the way that I have been able to gain rest is through positive experiences. And the part of me that knew God all along was able to keep having interaction and positive experiences with God during the years that I was being abused. And then as each part of me took steps to try and get out, I really hated the violence, uh, hated the things that were happening,
Yes.
and really wanted not to be a part of it.
Hmm.
But it was very difficult not to be a part of it because there was so much force involved. They did so many things that
Yes.
really put your life on the line, to where you believed that if you didn't do what they said, then you were going to die. And
Yeah.
death was a real thing that we had to deal with. And that
Hmm.
kind of force or coercion is very powerful. So, in overcoming it or walking away from it or leaving it, I had to get to a point where I really believed that uh, it was it was better for me if they killed me, and I was trying to leave, than for me to stay in it. And so I began doing some things in my childhood that extended into my teenage years, that eventually built in my 20s, that led me out of the group. And I can say out of the groups because my parents were not only practicing Satanism, but they were also uh, a part of the Mormon Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I didn't was very involved with uh, both of those groups until God made a way for me to come out. And it was all the experiences of Him making a way for me and providing for me. Those kind of experiences were what allowed me to trust God and allowed me to have enough courage and resources to be able to get away.
And it takes a lot of courage and it takes resources. And when you talked about the being in Satanism and Mormon Church, was your abuse also like multi-generational, familial? Um,
Yes, my uh, I will say that so much of what happened growing up was based on lies. And the more I learned, the more I learned the truth, the more I realized how much of my reality was just based on lies. And
mhm.
so a lot of the things that I was taught growing up, I have no idea of their validity. But the picture that I got growing up was that it was multi-generational. My parents' parents were involved. So I know it went back at least to my grandparents. But of course, I never knew my great grandparents or people that came, ancestors that were before them. I don't know. I was taught stories growing up about them and, told that our family, as far as it, went back and back and back and back, that we were all this way forever. But I'm sure there were others like me that uh, left, and I'm not sure that it did go back and back and back. I just know that whatever whatever their agenda was what the picture that they were trying to paint. So the thing that they were trying to show me was that the ways of witchcraft and the ways of darkness were the only way to live. And it was really a culture, a culture that was imposed on me from birth, and a culture that I believe my parents grew up in, to where they believed that no matter what they did, in order for them to survive or continue living, that they had to carry on in these ways. I don't think that they really saw a choice. And I know
Right.
for a good part of my life, I didn't see a choice either. I just grew up thinking, oh, this is the way the world is, and this is the world, and here we are, and this is the way everybody operates, and you don't know what's happening in other people's homes. I feel like I tried to learn about what a more normal family life would be like from TV.
Mhm.
The happy families that were on TV were my closest. And I had a few neighbors that seemed to have uh, families free of involvement in organized evil. So that
Hmm.
it helps some to meet some people who didn't have the same
Yeah, because then you have
experiences.
something to compare it to. Like I don't know, like everybody's different as far as like when they watch TV, if they know, is that real life? Is that a picture of what life is for other people? But when you see real life families and you see differences, it does give you something different to compare it with. And when I think of the resources and the courage that God gave you and the part of you that was able to, trust him more and more, and then how he made a way that you could escape. Um, well, like for most of us that have had SRA, we have blocked out the things that have happened that are hidden in the family and in these groups. And then at some point, we have something that triggers us to start remembering. Would you want to share what that was like for you and how you had already been seeing a view of your family that it's like, wait a minute, am I being lied to about the story that they're telling me? And how was it for you? And was there like a turning point that if you look back now, you can see where God was making a way for you to escape, or multiple things, maybe one after the other.
I can see pretty clearly that there was a time when I was faced with either healing and figuring things out rapid fire or losing my life. There had been some things that I had done that were against the group and that were rebellious in nature. And so there was suicide programming put into place, and I kept uh, getting told by different people in the cult that I would have, one more chance, one more chance. Don't blow this because if you blow this, then it's going to be done. You're going to be done. We're going to be done with you.
Oh my gosh.
And so by the time I was 16, I had made enough mistakes that I believed that it was over. And um, looking back, I can see how they still were manipulating me even into my 20s, which is when I began to remember and when I gained a conscious awareness that I was in danger and that I needed to leave. Um, it- the year that I remembered was the same year that my brother and several of the other people that were close in age to us began to remember. We all began to remember at the same time, and all of our suicide programming went into effect at the same time. And I'm not quite sure what they were thinking or why that was. All I know is that um, my brother and I both started to have feelings come over us about wanting to kill ourselves, and it seemed very out of the blue. And we got together and talked about it. Talked about, we actually talked about ways that we could take our own lives, and we talked about these impulses and urges that we were having, and how it was just so weird that it seemed like it was out of the blue, and we didn't really understand because we weren't really depressed and we didn't understand what was happening. And uh, it got pretty serious. Um, this was the year 1990, and in that year, at the beginning of that year, I developed a strep infection, and then that infection went in to a more serious infection, and I kept thinking that was how I was going to die. I was going to die through this infection. And then that didn't happen. I got better and didn't die. But because I was feeling so much intense emotion like I was going to die, I decided that I would get into therapy and that I would uh, see what was happening. And so I
Hmm.
started looking at things and from a very high level. I had done a little bit of therapy before then, but not for very long. And my parents got involved with the therapy that I was doing and convinced me that only people who are crazy go to therapy and that it's very shameful to have any kind of mental health issues and that you don't ever talk about therapy and that you don't go to therapy uh, if you have mental problems. And so
Yeah, there was a lot
this,
of stigma back then.
yeah, this therapist was different. This therapist was one that I chose that didn't have anything to do with my parents, who my parents weren't also involved with or seeing or talking to or whatever. And um, after I had been meeting with him for a few months, he was able to see that I was having some disassociation. And there was one session that we had where he was talking to me and I drifted off in my mind and was hearing a voice from within myself talking to myself. And the voice was the voice of a young child, and the young child was crying and was saying, "I didn't do it. It's not my fault. I didn't do it.
Mm.
It's not my fault." And I didn't understand where the voice was coming from, so I started talking to the voice and saying, um, "I don't understand.
Mhm.
You didn't do what? What's not your fault? Can you please explain this?" And so I really didn't understand what was happening at all. And
Mm.
at the end of the session, I told the therapist I was seeing about what had happened to me, and he said, "Oh," he said, "Well, I suspected this," and um, he said, "That's very interesting, and we'll have to talk about this next time." And because my hour was up and his
Oh
next
no.
time was waiting. And so I said, "No, I don't understand what just happened. And
Hmm.
I am very confused and I can't leave here until you explain
Right.
what this is about. If you know something about what this is about, please explain." And so he was impatient and really trying to get to his next client. And he pulled a book off of his shelf and opened it up and read a little paragraph about disassociation, about how if there's a child who has something traumatic happen to them, and then that child needs to go on to school the next day, then the child will forget the traumatic event, and a, a part of that child will deal with that traumatic event, hold on to it, and then the rest of the child can go on and function and go to school. So he explained that that was what had happened to me, and I'd never heard of that before. I had no idea that that was a common trauma response and that that
Hmm.
happens, especially to people who undergo trauma that is inescapable, that they have to
Yes.
keep. going through. And it's not just a
Mhm.
one-time event, but it's something that they're experiencing over and over and over again. And
Yes.
then this is the way the human brain handles it. And I just had no education in that department. And so
Yeah, it's
after I
not
got,
something they talked about.
no,
Mm.
they don't teach you that in school. Um,
Mm.
there's no really, a lot of people are not trauma informed even now. People that work
Right.
in the medical system and people that work
Mhm.
in schools and institutions of all kinds are trauma ignorant. They have no idea about how the human brain works and what to look for and how to help other people who have been traumatized. And
Yeah. When I think about you hearing that child voice and crying, and for you to have the ability to just talk to that part of you then, and even though you didn't understand it, when the therapist that was impatient uh, opened up that book and read you that paragraph, did that help to, how did that help you, like, to
it gave me
connect
at least
with?
some kind of framework for, okay, so maybe something happened to me that I don't remember. And maybe, um, maybe a part of me does remember it. And this thing that happened to me, happened to me when I was 5. And so maybe
Mhm.
this 5-year-old part of me remembers this thing that happened to me. And I thought, this is really terrible. And I I did remember being raped at a park by a friend of our family, and I didn't understand that that friend of the family was a part of our satanic cult at that point.
Yeah.
I just thought he was a creepy friend of the family, and I
Mhm.
thought that that one rape was all I had to deal with and get over. And I thought that it was definitely life shattering or changing because
Mhm.
you grow up thinking that you have one personality and one ego state, and um that's the way humans are, and
Yeah.
that's what it is to be normal or whatever. And then when you find out that you have more than one memory or more than one personality or more than one self state, then it changes your whole viewpoint of the universe of what is possible and what you are like and what other people are like and
Mhm.
what other people can be like. And it just was
It
like
does. I'm so sorry for that rape and for all the other things that happened to you that you didn't yet know. Um, when I think of the therapist that some cults, like get us connected with, if we are going to go to therapy, and then the programming that there is to keep us from trusting anyone outside of that group. Um, how was it for you then with this therapist that you were going to? You knew you needed therapy, and then he's telling you about this paragraph in this book, like, oh, now I got to deal with the fact that there's something that happened to me that I didn't remember. Was it hard for you to trust this therapist?
he
Because,
made sure that I had an appointment and a longer appointment very soon after that because he knew I was going to be in crisis. He knew that this was a big deal for me and was going to be really difficult for me to handle. So he made accommodations for me within his schedule, and that was really great. And he was an older therapist who had had experience, and I believe that he had worked with um, other ritual abuse survivors already by that point. And
mm-hmm.
uh,
The reason
I
I,
had
sorry.
to trust him
Hmm.
because I was fighting for my life. And part of me knew
Mhm.
that that suicide programming had kicked in
Yeah.
with the coming of a year, and that it was either find out about what was going on, or I was probably going to kill myself, or they were going to kill me.
Yeah.
And so, about a month after I had remembered um, that first incident that had just happened to a part of me, then I learned about a lot more. It just
Mhm.
kind of came in a very overwhelming way. But I had to know. And at the time, God was so good, He was already arranging things in the outside world that made it possible for us to leave. My husband um, was not a part of the cult when we got married. He did, um, my family did try and suck him in by offering him employment, and he was working for my dad. And so my dad controlled our paychecks and kind of was manipulating us
Mhm.
with lifestyle and just holding the power and authority of our income over our heads. And then my dad's company went bankrupt in the same year that everything was going down for me. And so that made it so that my husband was able to look for a job out of state and find one. And when he did, uh, my dad was completely irate. He probably believed that that was, um, I don't know if he just felt threatened that I was going to threaten the group, or if he had some concern for me, feeling like that was a death sentence on my head. Because growing up, they had a belief that they couldn't ever move away. They could leave for short periods of time, but they couldn't move away from the area or away from the state. They couldn't move away from the group, is what it
Mhm.
was really about.
Yeah.
And they did travel some and did do things in other places for times, but they would always come back to the same place. And so when my husband got the job in another state, I believed, part of me believed that that was going to be a death sentence and that we couldn't move and that it wasn't safe to move,
Oh,
and I was terrified to move. But
I
then
bet
other
you were.
parts of me were all on board for moving and
Mhm.
really wanted to move and we're ready to move and we're happy to move. And so
Mhm.
we moved. We moved 1,000 miles away, and then we moved and moved and moved, and I changed my name, and I uh, didn't, I broke off ties eventually. I didn't break off ties um, initially because I didn't know enough. It took me some time to get back enough memories to understand
Mhm.
who was who and what was happening.
Yes, it does take time. And as you connect with the parts that help you to remember what happened to you, it's like then you have bits and pieces of like, oh, these people are unsafe to be around. And, it's good I did get away. It is good that you did get away. Um, Earlier when we were talking about like your therapist who pretty much diagnosed you with his little paragraph from the book, uh, it's like the programming, or should I say the perpetrators. Um, Sometimes they have people in places like therapists or other helping professionals that are involved with the group. And I've had the horror of having survivors share with me that they spent years being reaccessed and reprogrammed by a therapist. going there thinking that they're going to get help, and then it ends up that they couldn't even trust that person either. And
Yeah. I really wonder
that's,
if it happened like that for my cousin because I can remember her and I talking after I remembered the rape that I mentioned. I talked to her about who was the person who did it, and the reason why I did was because everything went through our family. Like when one person knew something, everybody knew privacy or any boundaries or anything. And so when I told people in my family what had happened, I had people in my family come forward and say, "Oh yeah, um, me too. He's quite the predator. He he hurt me too, and he did this to me too." And I I was finding it odd that they knew that he was a predator, but they didn't protect me from him. I couldn't really make sense out of that. And then with my cousin, I can remember we had this conversation where she said, how am I going to keep my children safe? How am I going to keep my children from being preyed on by this predator? And I can remember
oh,
she talking to me about her therapist, telling her that all she needed, that there was so many things that she just couldn't control, and all she needed in this world was to love, and she just needed to love everybody, and everything would just work out, and her children would be protected. And I can remember thinking, that's not going to work. I can
right.
remember thinking,
Hmm.
I am not going to have my children anywhere near this perpetrator. This perpetrator is not going to ever have access to my children. And once I figured out that my parents were perpetrators, then I knew that my children were never going to see those grandparents again. That was just not going to happen because I could not and would not trust. And it it might have been different if they would have confessed and really looked like they were making an effort to change, and if God assured me that they were changing. And there's a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation, and forgiveness and just letting someone go. And
Yeah. If,
I had to
and you
let
can,
them go.
yeah. Sometimes you have to let them go. I had to let mine go too. There's a difference between a parent that gets help and seeks resources for themselves, and they, have the same God, that helps them to have healing, and the parents that they they're just in it, and they're not even aware of perhaps what's even happened to them or what they're continuing to do. And that's no excuse, however, but thinking about the I know that I had programming, and maybe you have too, where I was taught and trained not to be able to trust myself, and that I'm bad, evil, dangerous even, and that it would take 10 men to even handle me. Like if I ever, um, it's almost like the belief that, um, if I even remembered, not just that I would go crazy, but that, like, as if World War III or something would happen, and how somehow I'm dangerous. So even being able to trust ourselves can be very difficult, especially when we have this conditioning with all these lies that we've been shown and told either would happen or definitely will happen. And then when, here you are with siblings that, all this self-harm programming is going off for all of you at the same time, and you're remembering it's really hard to know, who do I trust? Am I going to hurt myself? Am I going to hurt other people? Or, what is going on here? And trusting God above all things, like our prayers are very, it might not happen right away, but praying for God to bring people in our lives. I think of people that are still in this type of thing, like what do we say to them? Like prayer, pray. If any part of you believes, even in prayer, even if you are angry at God and you think, why is my life like this? Um, it's like our heart can cry out, even in tears, even if we don't have words. Please send me somebody that's safe, somebody that I can trust. And he will. Uh, but like, there's so much sophisticated programming and multiple parts that have, lies underneath all that fear and terror that they carry. Um, what can we tell people that are hearing us today that, you know, can really make a difference in their lives? Because you and I both have gotten free, and, just like the resources that you were given by God, and He made a way that you could escape, and He did the same with me. Um, I didn't wake up, like to awareness, like, oh, I'm in a cult and I've been ritually abused and I was trafficked. No, it's like there's an awareness that something's not right. And, then there's people that God puts in place and resources. Um, what would you say to people that just don't know who to trust and um, that maybe are still in it, especially uh, because they're the ones that need to be able to trust God or someone before they can trust God.
Yeah, one thing that I thought about this morning was about how uh, it's not something that, like you just said, that happens overnight. It's something
Right.
that happens over time. And the reason why it happens, why healing happens, and why freedom happens, and why miracles and it all getting so much better happens is because we take one step after another step after another step, and we keep taking steps and we don't stop. We don't get to a place where we say, I have arrived. I am I am whole and completely integrated with the universe, and I have no more work that I need to do, and um, I am I'm totally perfect because I think when we get to that place, uh, if it were true, we'd probably no longer be on the planet, and more than likely we still have work to do. And that journey of being able to ask, even when I had many prayers as a child that weren't answered in the way that I wanted them answered at the time that I wanted them answered. And parts of me believed that God didn't answer my prayers. But after looking back on the journey and being at the place I am now, I can see He did answer my prayers. He just didn't answer them in my timing. He
Yes.
answered them in His timing. He did deliver me, but it wasn't um, when I would have liked to have been delivered. Maybe before it ever started would have been nice, but for whatever reason, I um, had all those difficulties and went through all those trials, and He didn't spare me that storm or spare me those experiences. And I have learned different things from those experiences, and those have changed me in ways, and he's still working with me and changing me and helping me to grow. And I definitely don't have it all figured out. I don't know the answers, but I do know that God is real, and I do know that He does help those who ask for it, and He does help those who continue to try and get help. And if if by some miraculous chance I would have been able to listen to um, someone who had had the same experience as me, similar experiences, talk about freedom and getting out, I think um, I think it's hard to believe sometimes. It's really hard to believe that you can get out. It's hard to
Yes.
the see the truth. And the truth is that there is a way out. There is a way. And it's like sometimes you feel like you're at the edge of a cliff, and the only, you're backed up against this cliff, and the only way that you can go forward is to jump off the cliff. And it looks like that's terrifying. And you don't want to do that, and you don't think you'll survive if you do that. But I guess I had to get to a point within myself where I knew that it was better for me um, to not survive a life in that culture than it was for me to just continue going with it and believing that that's all there was. And because
Yes.
I was willing to go that far, then I was able to get out of it. And I had two brothers that died that didn't get out, and two brothers that stayed with it and are still stuck in it. And I don't even know if they have children or not, but I know that it goes on, and it goes on for whoever believes that that's the only way and that there is no other way, and they don't believe that they can jump off that cliff and that someone is going to catch them and help
Right.
them into, and I'm not talking about self-destructing. I'm talking about trusting God.
Yeah, like taking that cliff and jumping off as he catches us because I felt that same thing, Stephanie, and I'm so sorry about the loss of your brothers. And the just like my family, I have members that my father was murdered, and I don't have contact with any of my siblings, which is better because, sometimes that's what we need to do. But I felt the same way that you described, like I literally felt like I was dying inside. And um, it was like I felt like I was jumping off of this place. I didn't think of it as a cliff, but like I was jumping off of this place that I had always known, and that I was literally uh, in no man's land, like I had no idea what was gonna come next because I literally was leaving everything behind me. And I did feel like a part of me that did believe that there's something good out there. I was Catholic, so I knew about God, but I didn't know Jesus then, but he knew me. But that's literally what happened is that God caught me and gave me the people that he needed me to have in my life. And I can honestly say that I trusted that person especially more than I trusted God. And sometimes that needs to happen while we're building that trust. And I think that recovery from this kind of darkness and evil is a trust journey because these people do every single thing humanly possible with the help of Satan himself to get us to not be able to trust anyone but them, which is a lie. But they get you to believe that they're all there is, and they're the only ones that love you, and they're the only ones you can trust, and that there is no help and there is no escape. But even if a person can put their trust in another person, and that person knows God, especially if they know God, that person can hold the hope for the survivor that's needing to get out, that doesn't trust God yet fully, or maybe even at all. Um, that person can hold that trust for them until they can take those steps and learn to trust Him too. And it's a choice. God does not uh, force Himself on anyone. He's completely different than the people that are using force and power and control over us. Um, but recently, I won't say who it is or anything, but recently I have had a person calling me on the phone, and their awareness of what has happened to them is so amazingly huge because of and it's about God, not me, but they trust me. And I say this because you I believe that we all have to have that time period where we trust in something, even if it's another person. And yeah, Christians will say, no, you can't put your trust anywhere else but God. And it's like, well, you go through this and see what happens. That's kind of my response right now to them. And so they've even said to me that I'm like God to them right now because they're angry at at God. And I just allow them. We can just allow people to be in the place where they're at with God because there's usually a part of them that believes in God or something that was there with them during the hell that they were in. And of course, how would a person trust anyone or anything after being put through with like what you have gone through and what I have gone through and so many other survivors. So in the miracle uh, of how you escaped and how I escaped and how God did made a way and there was a way out, even though like when I think about the time period that like suicide programming was going off and you had to trust somebody, a therapist, being in dire crisis mode. uh, you do get to a place where it's like you have to take what's offered and what's available, and God made that available for you. Thank God He did.
Yeah, I think even more than the therapist, the person that I would have trusted in that scenario was my husband.
Yes.
Husband was a good man, is a good man,
Mhm.
and is uh, has always shown me what kindness and love and true love really looks like. And so he was there throughout all of that tumultuous time, and I was able to lean on him. And then when we moved, he was steady and was able to, when we first moved, and I didn't understand what was happening. I did have the suicide programming pretty intense, and I did spend a week in the hospital, and he was able to help me get to the hospital so that I was in a safe place and was able to stabilize and get another therapist on the other end, and everything was able to help me continue that journey that I had started. And so,
Yeah. For me, that person was my husband too, before he became my husband. He was the first person that I could trust, and he and still is great support and showed me love, what really love is. Um, and just like with parts that had no reason to trust, it's like, what was it like for you to have that relationship with your husband? And was that a trust journey too, that you didn't just instantly trust him, or what was that like?
yeah, that sounds like a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, yeah, it could be, especially learning how to have relationships. Hmm. Well, I'm thankful that God helped both of us to develop trust in Him and in people that He put in place for us. And is there anything else that you would like to share before we wrap up?
No, but I would like to thank you again for everything because it's been nice. It's been a um, good opportunity for me to be a little bit more transparent and a little bit braver and to trust God a little bit more because it's hard to talk out loud about things that uh, might be difficult for other people to understand or that people might misunderstand and judge you for. And so
Right.
it's good to have a safe place to do that. And I know that it takes a lot of effort on your part to provide a safe place, and I appreciate it.
I thank you, Stephanie. Oh, sorry. I can edit that out. Um,
Okay, we're going to use my name anyway.
oh, okay. So, yeah, it's an honor to like just with the resources and things God put in place for me to, then provide that for other people. And it's such an honor to see people, like go a little bit or maybe a lot out of their comfort zone and use their voice and speak out in different ways and be able to be that hope for other people that we've been given. Um, I know that today's episode has not been easy to hear, um, but it is a necessary thing because I think when people see someone as courageous as you are, uh, and not just a survivor of ritual abuse and mind control, but an overcomer who has victoriously um, been able to trust God in deeper ways, and um, this type of trauma is something that would be hard for anyone to imagine that hasn't gone through it. But I'm thankful that when we do take those steps in trusting God, even after the betrayal, the manipulation, the terrorism of our minds and souls, and the wounding and the harm that it does, it is a miracle that we are able to trust again at all. Lord Jesus, I thank you for uh, being the way, the truth, and the life, and that you did make a way for us to find you and to find our way out. And we do ask that you would be with all the survivors out there and those who are, especially are still caught in this darkness, that you would create those resources and people that they can trust and have the kindness and love that we have experienced with our husbands and with therapists, and thank you for the transformational prayer and the healing that comes as a result of that. And I thank you for trusting us, God, with, I never thought of that before, like trusting us with sharing about you with others. God, it's such an honor to be able to do that. And I do ask, we ask together that our words would leave listeners with hope and just being able to rebuild their lives and to have that sacred personal journey. And none of our journeys look the same. But the truth is, God, you're not afraid of our trauma. You're not the author of confusion or abuse. You are the restorer, the rescuer, and the healer of hearts. God, thank you that you came to heal the brokenhearted and set the captives free. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you so much.